Bristol, 1989. Rusty Wallace bumps Dale Earnhardt hard entering turn 3. Metal scrapes, paint flies. The Intimidator glares through his window. Rusty stares back. No fear shown. Championship season. Can't back down. But that night, alone in his hotel room, Rusty's hands still shake. Not from adrenaline. From understanding he'd just challenged the most dangerous driver NASCAR ever produced. At 69, Rusty finally admits it. Toughness was performance. Fear was real. Rusty Wallace built his career on aggression nobody questioned. 55 Cup victories earned by bumping, blocking, and racing physical enough that competitors knew Rusty wouldn't lift. The 1989 championship proved it worked. Roger Penske believed in that style enough to keep Rusty at Penske Racing for years. Fans loved it. Sponsors accepted it. Competitors hated it, but respected the consistency. But behind every aggressive move was calculation Rusty never admitted publicly. His every bump required measuring consequences. Every block meant understanding retaliation. Racing physical works until you race someone more willing to crash than you are. Then aggression becomes liability instead of advantage. Rusty learned that lesson repeatedly. 5 drivers taught him that fear doesn't mean weakness. It means survival instinct recognizing when toughness alone isn't enough. At 69, having watched NASCAR evolve past his aggressive era into something more corporate and calculated, Rusty can finally admit what he never said during racing years. 5 drivers scared him into understanding that fearlessness is performance and fear is honesty about what racing costs. Number 5. Bobby Allison. Bobby Allison was everything Rusty wanted to be before Rusty understood what becoming that cost. Alabama gang toughness, 84 wins. Physical racing that made competitors question whether Bobby understood consequences or just didn't care. Rusty watched Bobby race like survival was optional. At Martinsville, Bobby held his line through contact that should have made both drivers lift. At Bristol, he door-slammed competitors through corners where sheet metal damage was guaranteed. Every move showed commitment Rusty admired and feared simultaneously. The fear came from recognition. Rusty raced Bobby early in his career. Tried bumping him at Richmond the way Rusty bumped everyone else. Bobby bumped back twice as hard, sent Rusty into the wall, finished the race like nothing happened. After that Richmond race, Rusty sat in his hauler understanding something terrifying. He'd built his reputation on being the most physical driver on track. Bobby was more physical, more willing to crash, more committed to proving toughness meant never backing down regardless of damage. That realization changed how Rusty raced Bobby, and more cautiously, more calculated, less aggressive, because racing physical only works when you're the toughest driver on track. Bobby proved Rusty wasn't. Years later, after Bobby's Pocono crash nearly killed him, after he lost both sons to racing, Rusty thought about all their battles, wondered if Bobby's fearlessness was courage or just delayed consequences that Rusty avoided, and Bobby eventually didn't. Bobby Allison scared Rusty by proving that being the toughest driver means eventually racing someone tougher. And when that happens, aggression becomes the thing that gets you hurt instead of wins. Number 4. Mark Martin. Mark Martin terrified Rusty in ways Bobby's aggression never could. Not through physical racing, through complete immunity to intimidation that made Rusty's aggressive style useless. Rusty built his career on making competitors nervous and bumping them early to establish dominance, blocking aggressively to show he wouldn't back down. Most drivers adjusted their racing after feeling Rusty's bumper, gave him room, raced him differently. Mark never adjusted, never changed his line, never gave Rusty the satisfaction of knowing the intimidation worked. At Bristol, Rusty bumped Mark repeatedly, turn after turn, lap after lap, trying to make Mark lift or move or show any indication the contact bothered him. Mark held his line every single time, raced Rusty like the bumping was weather instead of warfare, That immunity drove Rusty insane. His entire strategy required competitors reacting to aggression. Mark's refusal to react made Rusty's aggression look desperate instead of dominant. The fear came from understanding his primary weapon was useless against Mark. Rusty could bump all day. Mark would hold his line all day. And eventually Rusty would crash himself trying to move someone who wouldn't be moved. Their battles became psychological warfare Rusty couldn't win. Every bump Mark ignored made Rusty question whether his aggressive style was smart or just worked against drivers too polite to race back the same way. Mark Martin won 40 races and finished second in the championship 5 times racing clean. Rusty won 55 races and won championship racing physical. The statistics suggest Rusty's style was more successful. But racing against Mark felt like losing even when Rusty won, because Mark proved toughness without aggression was possible. And that possibility made Rusty's entire approach feel like compensation for something Mark never needed. Number 3. Darrell Waltrip. Darrell Waltrip scared Rusty through unpredictability that made every restart feel like gambling with no reliable odds. Rusty raced physical. That meant competitors could predict his moves, expect bumps, anticipate blocks, prepare for aggression. Darrell was never predictable. At Martinsville, he'd race clean. At Bristol, he'd bump aggressively. At Talladega, he'd block unexpectedly, then give room the next lap for no apparent reason. Every race brought different Darrell that Rusty couldn't prepare for, but the real fear came from Darrell's mind games. The talking, the predictions. The comments designed to get inside competitors' heads and stay there during races when focus mattered most. Before Richmond, Darrell told reporters Rusty was overrated, said his aggressive style was compensation for lacking pure talent, said anyone could win races by bumping people and hoping officials allowed it. Rusty heard it, couldn't stop thinking about it. During the race, every bump he considered felt like proving Darrell right. Every aggressive move felt like confirming Darrell's criticism. Rusty finished 4th. Darrell won. After the race, reporters asked Darrell about his pre-race comments. Darrell smiled, said he'd been joking, hadn't meant anything by it, just having fun. But Rusty knew better. Darrell had planted doubt that affected Rusty's racing, made him hesitate, made aggression feel like weakness instead of strength. The mind game had worked perfectly. Racing Darrell meant fighting 2 battles. The physical race on track. The psychological race in Rusty's head where Darrell's words created doubt about whether Rusty's style was smart or just aggressive enough to work until someone smarter came along. Darrell Waltrip won 84 races and 3 championships using intelligence Rusty's physical style couldn't match. That intelligence scared Rusty more than any bumper ever could, because you can't bump your way past someone who's already inside your head. Number 2. Dale Earnhardt. Dale Earnhardt was the driver Rusty feared most among competitors. The Intimidator, 7 championships, 76 wins, a reputation built on making everyone else scared. But Rusty's fear of Dale wasn't about intimidation. It was about recognition. Rusty saw himself in Dale's aggressive style, the bumping, the blocking, the physical racing that made competitors adjust their approach. Everything Rusty did, Dale did better and more successfully. Dale won 7 championships racing physical. Rusty won 1. That difference terrified Rusty because it suggested Dale had mastered what Rusty was still learning, had taken aggressive racing to levels Rusty couldn't reach, had turned intimidation into championships while Rusty turned it into wins, but not sustained dominance. Every time Rusty raced Dale, he felt like racing a better version of himself. Dale bumped harder, blocked more effectively. He made aggression look like strategy instead of desperation. Rusty bumped, and it looked like temper. Dale bumped, and it looked like championship racing. The Bristol incident in 1989 epitomized everything. Rusty's championship season. He needed to establish dominance. Bumped Dale hard to prove he belonged among champions. Dale's glare through the window said everything. Dale wasn't impressed, wasn't intimidated, was measuring retaliation for later. That night, Rusty's shaking hands proved what Toughness couldn't admit. He'd challenged the most dangerous driver in NASCAR, made himself a target, started a war his aggressive style couldn't guarantee winning. Dale never retaliated the way Rusty feared, just raced him hard, made every battle feel like Dale was teaching lessons about how aggression should work, made Rusty feel like student instead of equal. Dale Earnhardt scared Rusty because he was proof that Rusty's ceiling was Dale's floor, yet that maximum aggression Rusty could employ was standard operating procedure for Dale. That being tough was enough to win races, but being the Intimidator was what won 7 championships. Number 1, himself. But the driver Rusty feared most wasn't Bobby or Mark, or Darrell, or Dale. It was Rusty Wallace himself. The aggression that won 55 races was the same aggression that cost championships. The toughness that made him successful was the thing preventing sustained dominance. Rusty knew it during his career but couldn't stop. The aggressive style was who he was. Changing meant admitting it was wrong, admitting it was compensation instead of strength, admitting that clean racers like Mark Martin had something Rusty lacked. Every bump Rusty delivered required calculation. Every block meant measuring consequences. Every aggressive move was Rusty fighting against the part of himself that knew backing down sometimes was smarter than pushing forward always. The 1989 championship proved his style could win titles, but one championship in a career that long suggested the style had limits. Dale won 7 racing similar aggression. Jeff Gordon won 4 racing clean. Rusty won 1 racing physical. The fear Rusty carried was knowing his approach was simultaneously his strength and his limitation. That being the most aggressive driver meant being too aggressive sometimes. That wins came despite the style as much as because of it. At 69, having watched NASCAR evolve past aggressive racing into calculated corporate competition, Rusty understands what he feared during those racing years. He feared himself, feared that his greatest strength was his biggest weakness, feared that the bumping and blocking and physical racing that defined him was the thing preventing him from achieving what talent alone suggested was possible. Rusty Wallace won 55 races being Rusty Wallace. He wonders now if he could have won 80 racing like Mark Martin, or 7 championships racing like Dale, but with more control. The fear is knowing he'll never know if being himself was enough, or if being himself was exactly what wasn't enough. At 69, Rusty finally admits it. The driver he feared most was the one staring back from every mirror, the aggressive racer who won big but wondered if winning bigger required becoming someone else. Toughness was performance. The fear was admitting that performance had limits talent alone couldn't overcome. Rusty Wallace spent 20 years racing physical enough that competitors knew bumpers were weapons and blocks were warnings. 55 victories proved it worked. 1 championship proved it had limits. Bobby Allison, Mark Martin, Darrell Waltrip, Dale Earnhardt, and Rusty himself taught him that aggression is strategy until you race someone who doesn't care about bumpers or someone too smart to need them. At 69, Rusty finally tells the truth. Toughness was performance hiding fear that being himself was exactly what prevented becoming better. Subscribe for more untold racing stories that reveal what champions feared when toughness wasn't enough.